Every time we have, a curfew, it hurts the economy quite a bit because people here in Ecuador go out late at night.
Let's talk about what Ecuador is like for Ecuadorians during this crisis. Some quick disclaimers. First, I of course can't speak for every single citizen in Ecuador. But since I and my family are Ecuadorian, and since I have spoken to my friends and coworkers about what's currently happening, I wanted to tell you what things are like from our perspective. And second, this is not a news video. If any news is mentioned, it is with the purpose of better explaining what the situation in Ecuador is for Ecuadorians. So like my good buddy Don mentioned, the majority of people who are really going through a hard time in this crisis is the people who have a business, and that business, mostly restaurants, runs into the night. I know this firsthand because my dad actually runs a business in the city that we live in. So he normally sells better, and it's a weird thing too that maybe a lot of people might not understand. He actually sells better at later hours of the night. For example, there were some nights that he would stay open until 3 in the morning, and at that time, he would get people who were coming out of clubs or coming out of, parties, and they would actually buy from his business. So he actually made more money staying later into the night than earlier hours in the afternoon, because he does normally open at around 5 p.m., sometimes a little bit earlier, 4:30, sometimes a little bit later, 5:10, but he normally sells better at later hours of the night. So that's why from firsthand experience, I can tell you that because of the curfew that we're going through right now, where we're only allowed to stay open until 11 o'clock p.m., it's not possible for him to sell as well as he normally would, because he can't stay open as late as he normally would, where he would normally sell a little bit more. And that's not even guaranteed all the time, but at least it would be better than some nights where he would come upstairs and sell absolutely nothing. But that's just an example that's close to home. There are of course people who work at restaurants, who are waiters, waitresses, who have their own restaurant, and they're not selling right now because they can't stay open as late as possible. Bars especially, places that sell alcohol, which I don't go to, but I realize they are a driving factor of the economy here because everyone goes out to drink. And of course, using everyone loosely, there are exceptions, but the majority of people, when you want to find them out on weekends, they're out drinking, they go out to eat, and then they go out to drink, or they're out at parties, which normally have drinks. So it kind of takes a big hit on the economy when they can't stay open as late and sell as much as they normally would. In some ways, some people might argue that's a good thing because, less drunk drivers, less drunk people out on the street, less noise out on the street, and they're valid arguments, of course. But right now, the situation with the economy, we can't miss a day of work, because a day of work missed is a really big hit on our wallets and our financial situation at home. And just to give a little bit more info on how the crisis affected our financial situation, especially with the rating of the news station, we weren't able to give classes because parents were not sending their kids to the academy, and they were not going to send them to schools either. And for people who had to go out and work, who was going to go out and work when they were at risk or they were afraid of something happening to them because of a bomb, because of a terrorist wanting to end them, because of something else that could happen to them being out on the streets? There were a lot of news reports about cars being exploded, about people lighting cars on fire, about crime just in general rising a lot during that situation. And you have to understand that for us who live on a day-by-day basis, because if we don't work, we don't earn money, and if we don't earn money, how do we eat? How do we live? How do we pay for rent? How do we pay for things? This affected us a lot. And another thing that you have to understand is that even though the crisis, we're talking about the terrorist action and the action against the terrorists, is a very recent thing, that doesn't mean that this situation has just now been bad for people here in Ecuador. And it's something that I mentioned in my previous video, that the crisis itself, the problems with the narcos, and even aside from the problems with the narcos, just the economic crisis has been something that Ecuador has been going through for a very long time. And just to give you another example that's close to home, I have a friend who currently works at a place that pays her about half of the minimum wage. Maybe a little bit over or a little bit under, but it's around that range. And really, she doesn't have a lot of money to do a lot of things. And if it weren't for her living with her parents, she probably wouldn't be able to sustain her life here, because I have mentioned in videos before that it's very hard to sustain a life with the minimum wage in Ecuador. And for people who come from outside of the country and look at Ecuador as a very cheap place, it is. Really, it is, because I lived in the States as well, and I know that Ecuador is a cheap place to live in, especially if you compare it to the States. Even my good buddy Don right now is seeing the prices in the States, and it's pretty crazy. But for people living here who only know of the economy here and who have to live and thrive with what they have here, it's kind of hard to thrive, and you could just barely live with the minimum wage. So I can only imagine how tough it is for my friend who earns half of that. And the sad thing is that the reason that she earns that wage isn't because she wants to earn that wage. She actually has a college degree. And whenever she goes to try to find a job at the thing that she specialized in, she can't find one. And it's pretty common over here, like I'm pretty sure it's pretty common anywhere else, that there are people who graduate with a degree, and when they go to get a job, the job demands some kind of work experience. There are memes about it here, and I'm pretty sure there are other places in the world. There are memes about people who try to go get a job, and because they don't have work experience, the place won't give them a job. And I don't think it's fair if they don't give them a chance to work and show that they might be better than people who have experience just because they don't have that experience. And even when it comes to safety, we're plagued with the cruel reality that we can't even save money on transportation or having a nice home without having to have a whole bunch of security for it. In terms of transportation, a lot of people probably could reach their workplace by walking or taking a bus, but due to safety issues, a lot of people prefer to take a taxi or have a vehicle that takes them to work because it's just not worth going and walking and getting robbed and losing a lot more than spending a little bit more on a taxi or a bus in some cases to stay safe and, you know, save the things that you've worked so hard to get. And in that same sense, when you have a house, you have to make sure it's heavily guarded because you never know who's gonna try to get into your house and steal all of your things. And of course, with transportation and housing, all of this affects cost of living because even when you go out to do groceries, nowadays groceries are very expensive, which is something that I'm going to portray in my future cost of living videos, giving a little bit more information on groceries. So stay tuned for that. And even with all of this, I'm pretty sure that there's some people who think because I do YouTube, maybe because I'm out here at the park recording, or because sometimes I have nice moments that I can show through social media, that maybe the situation isn't so bad, or that maybe I'm exaggerating. But really, things have been very tough for me and for many people that I know for quite some time now. You can just ask the members of my channel that every month when I do an update, I tell them about not just the good things, but the bad things that have been happening over here in Ecuador and to my family and in my situation. And I can tell you that YouTube is not breaking bank. I just barely make it to the $100 threshold that is required from YouTube in order for them to give a payout. And even then, I don't see the whole $100 payout because the banks take their cut, YouTube takes its cut, so I'm lucky that YouTube gives me anything at all. And like I said, outside of the scope of me and the people that I know who are my friends or acquaintances, there are a lot of people in Ecuador who are Ecuadorians who are suffering because this situation is just so hard to live through. So the last thing I'll say is, I think what I've been saying this whole video, which is this situation is tough. And really, I'm pretty sure that a lot of Ecuadorians, if they could leave Ecuador, they most certainly would leave Ecuador because they probably have much better opportunities working hard as they work here in a different country and being compensated much better for it. And a lot of the times I would use the argument to those people who say that they'll have a better life in the States or in another country because they pay more, that what you earn, you end up wasting, spending when you're in that country because the cost of living is much more expensive. But right now, with the situation as it is, it definitely feels like that sacrifice, living in a different country, even if it means living in the smallest room, that in comparison over here would be super cheap and over in a different country could be very expensive, But even living in that smallest room and eating the bare minimum to live, people would definitely be much better off than they are currently here in Ecuador. And even I get comments all the time from people telling me that I should just go back to the States if it feels safer over there, if the situation is better over there. But I mean, those same people aren't exactly paying for me to go back to the States. They're not telling me, oh, here's a job for you that you're gonna have a great life with that job and you're not gonna be stressed. It's just not happening. Over here, it might be unsafe. Over here, it might be difficult to live with the salary that I have, but at least I can live. And as long as I take the precautions that I always take, that I always tell everyone that they should take when they're over here, then I'm okay. I'm not exactly the happiest person in the world because I have to carefully decide what I'm gonna spend money on, where I can or can't splurge a little bit more, and make decisions based on the very little that I have. Even the stuff that I have are things that I've purchased because I've saved up for various years. But going to the States and stressing myself out working all the time isn't the solution. It's like I saw recently in a video from a YouTuber that I recently discovered that he asked,
to those of you living in the US, are you really happy? Do you have the free time you want? Do you get to spend your days out here working in the garden, working on the farm, or are you just working to survive?
And I'm sure there's gonna be a few trolls that say, yes, they're happy, yes, they're okay, and they're not gonna mention just how hard they're breaking their backs and they don't have time to just take a moment to sit down and relax. But I mean, I guess if they have money, that's enough. So, you know, I guess you define your happiness your way. I'm happy as long as I don't have to stress out completely over the lifestyle that I live. I think that even if I'm economically struggling, I'm happy with being able to spend time with my family and being able to spend time with my friends instead of having to occupy all of that time to just strict working. But that's just me, that's just Ecuador, that's just Ecuadorian life. We're all just here trying to live our best life and trying to survive with what we have and trying to enjoy it the best way that we can. And really, I'd like to take this time to thank my channel members. I mentioned them a little bit earlier, but I forgot to thank them, that you make this a little bit easier. Everyone who supports the channel through donations, through being a member here or on buymeacoffee.com, all of that support just goes to make things better because things are hard. And it's not something that I can always mention, that I can always say because YouTube videos are kind of weird, but I really, really do appreciate everything that you do for me and for the channel, and more than anything because what you give to me, what you give to the channel also goes for my family, my parents, my brother, my family. It helps us out a lot, so thank you. And of course, I'd like to hear from you. If you're Ecuadorian, what's your situation like? Has it been tough? Since when has it been getting tough for you? And the same thing if you're not Ecuadorian, how are things for you in your country where you live in? Or if you're not Ecuadorian and you're here in Ecuador, how have you seen things? I like hearing from you, and I'll try my best to respond to everything that you have to say. And no matter who you are or where you live, I really hope that the situation where you're at and your personal situation gets better, no matter what that situation is, because we all deserve to be happy and to live our best lives.